Entrepreneurial Edge is brought to you by Business Banking from FNB, because small ideas can lead to big business. FNB, how can we help you?
Now, just before the break, we were talking about finance, and I'm going to look squarely at you, Sanjeev, because you're from the bank. Do we have the right kind of models in South Africa for the entrepreneur? What does the entrepreneur need? Does he need a bank finance, or does he need the angel financing, or what we call venture capitalists?
I think it's a combination, and I think for South Africa, you know, we tend to compare the models that we have in South Africa with Western countries that have much more developed models that work differently. So at the summit, we discussed something like the Silicon Valley model. I think in South Africa, it's very different because I think, as Malik was saying as well, we're a country of different contrasts. So you have exceptionally first world parts of the country and exceptional third world parts of the country as well. So if you think about it, and you know, I shared a few stats with you earlier in the show, another important stat for us is that about 30 to 35% of our entrepreneurs run businesses through their own personal banking accounts. So it would appear to us that they're almost bootstrapping their businesses. So the money that they're getting from, or the money that they get, is probably from different sources. Particularly in this environment, in this economic climate, I think getting money from a bank is almost shunned away from because there's fear around it. It's a difficult cycle.
Is it because it's extremely expensive to get capital in South Africa today?
I think so. And again, a nice analog is for your home loan. You know, you look at a rate of prime+1, prime+2, that's still fairly expensive, particularly if you're in an entrepreneurial type of a mindset where your chances of success are fairly low. You know, if you have a 50% chance of getting it right. And then you start thinking, and this is why the fear of failure becomes an issue. If I get this wrong, not only am I going to fail and I'm going to look as a failure to society, but I also have debt that I now need to repay. So I think, yeah, I think if you're looking for funding from a bank exclusively, it's probably not the ideal model. And again, in our own experiences, funding for growth, once a business is established, like I said earlier, to pay off debt needs a very cash generative business. I think borrowing from a bank for expansion and growth opportunities is probably the right model.
That makes more sense. Malik, you want to come in here about the whole financial model?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things, Lionel, that's very important is that financing in entrepreneurship is linked to the entrepreneurial journey. So basically, there's a typical journey that entrepreneurs go through, right?
It's not a destination; it's a journey.
Exactly, exactly. So, say for example, you have a burning idea of I don't know. I was going to say you know, a piece of clothing or a product or a service that you're really passionate about. So first, you're going to invest your own capital. You're going to take your savings. You're going to sell your car. You're going to go and beg your friends and your family to get some money to start the business, right? Once you do that, you prove the concept. So if it's a product, you prove that your prototype works, actually does what it is supposed to do. And people are beginning to sort of test it and agree that it works and want to buy it, right? At that stage, you need a first injection of capital because you need to now start producing your product in a professional way. So you need maybe a space to produce it. You need to buy raw materials. You need to get workers who are going to make the product. At that stage, the amount of capital that you need, most people cannot come up with that capital on their own. That's when they need the angel investors or what we call the venture capitalists.
But you know, it's so funny you talk about this because a lot of people that go through the blood, sweat, and tears of getting to that stage, and they were shunned by the banks initially, and you explain to them, no, you need to go to the bank to get your business to the next level. Do you find that attitude like, okay, the banks didn't want to help me at the first place, so now why should I go back to them?
Comes later. That comes later. But to Sanjeev's point, at that stage, the bank is not the right financier yet, because remember, the bank has, first and foremost, a responsibility to its depositors. 70% of businesses fail in the first 18 months. So a bank, it's not wise as a banker to put your money into this kind of statistics. So, nowhere in the world, angel investors and venture capitalists are those who should be there. Here is the problem in South Africa. The angel investors and the venture capitalists in other parts of the world have a model that is based on, I'm going to invest in 10 Lionels, 8 will fail, 2 will succeed. But the 2 that will succeed so well that it will pay off all the failures that we've invested in the other 8. In South Africa, angel investors
is he a philanthropist? Is he somebody that cares about people? Why does a venture capitalist put money out there?
A savvy businessman, and which brings to my next point, who looks into the future, but doesn't look in the past. In South Africa, most of people in that space still look in the past, but there's no past. because there's no cash flow, there's no history yet. Whereas a Silicon Valley investor looks in the future, the potential earnings, as opposed to the past cash flows. That's the big problem. And that's why you have a big gap in South Africa.
Okay.
And so once you go through that, then the entrepreneurs who are able to secure this kind of financing from a venture capitalist or a strategic investor or an angel investor pass that really critical stage, and then they scale because they have the capital to scale. And then when they reach a certain level, usually that's when they get ready for private equity, so a large chunk of money, or listing. And then that's when the banks come in, because then they need millions and millions of
they're coming late to the party.
Yeah.
Derek, what can we say about passion? I mean, it's all about getting that idea out there, and I know we're talking about money.
Yeah.
You want to come in?
Yeah, I want to just make a point on money. You know, we've spoken a lot about Silicon Valley. Sanjeev spoke a lot about some specific entrepreneurs. Every single one of the names he mentioned was a technology or IT entrepreneur, right? Every single one of those names. And we speak about the Silicon Valley model. What's the common denominator here? The common denominator here is that where investors are putting money and where great ideas are coming and the biggest potential businesses are being born is in the digital era, the digital age, the information age. So the days of brick and mortar companies that require massive cash upfront and ongoing big investments in working capital, I think in South Africa we need to encourage young people and people with this raw potential and people with passion to start up business, not to live in the shadow of the entrepreneur of the past, but to follow those names that, you know, follow in the footsteps of the names that Sanjeev spoke about, the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates and the Mark Zuckerbergs. These guys have built multi-billion-dollar businesses with very little money, in garages, with a couple of PCs, and they've been incredibly successful. The money came to them. The business was so good that the money was breaking the door down to get through. Right? There was so much money, they don't know what to do with it.
I would love to have that problem. You know, the bank manager knocking at my door saying, we want to give you this money. But Derek, let's be honest, right? South Africa, like many other countries on the continent, our ICT strategy is like miles behind the rest of the world. And you are telling me that that's where the opportunity of tomorrow is. Is that realistic?
Yeah, well, it's only realistic if we are producing people that have a fundamental foundation in mathematics and science, right? We have to, the starts and stops in the education system. We cannot expect people to build technology businesses if we have not enabled them through the education system. So there we all have a big role to play, right? It starts at home, it starts then at the school, and it starts, you know, in the workplace, and there's ongoing education throughout life. So do we have the raw talent? You asked the question earlier. In my mind, you know, South Africa's always punched above its weight in anything we've ever tried to do, right? Whether it's on the sporting fields, whether it's in business, whether it's in great startups, we've punched above our weight through the generations. The question is, are we going to continue to do that into the future with this change, the switch between the industrial age and the information age? Because the needs of the information age is a strong education foundation in mathematics and science. We have to produce people that we are enabling to do this. Passion won't get us there. Passion and all the money in the world won't get us there. We have to be able to give people the ability to realize their potential through a solid education.
I think that's where Endeavour comes in. That's part of what you do, and upskilling people. You know, it's so nice to talk about passion and money, but the skills is where the nuts and bolts isn't it?
Absolutely right. And South Africa is not the country that went through those motions. I mean, in America in the 80s, there were programs to spur entrepreneurship in inner city areas. And the same way that South Africa did in the past few years, the idea was to pour money into those areas. And then what they found is that people were getting into debt, people were getting into all sorts of financial trouble because they didn't have the skills to run those businesses. It's not just about making a great product or a service, it's all the talent that comes into turning these ideas and those products and those development ideas into businesses.
Are you saying Endeavour is going to try and get this into the curriculums in our education system?
That's not really our role, because we work with
lobby for it.
But we're part of that discussion. There's other organizations like Junior Achievements, for example, that are working with the government on that. But as Derek says, it has to be far deeper and far broader for African countries and South Africa to have a chance in the information.
Now, Sanjeev, you're obviously very passionate about education. You actually volunteer into underprivileged areas, and you want to give back to communities. But what do they tell you, those little kids?
Yeah, like I said earlier in the show as well, the difficulty we have is when I ask these students, and they grade 10 through to grade 12, what do you want to be in future? And I've been asking the question every week for weeks on end, and everybody says to me, a doctor, lawyer. So I think there's that dynamic.
None of them want to be a banker.
Very few of them. I think it's probably one of the newer sorts of careers out there. So actuary, even engineers is a bit difficult, but I think that will change. And I've been asking this question for many weeks on end, and I think so far it was just one little boy who said to me, I'm already an entrepreneur. I sell sweets at school and I make a bit of a markup. So I think that's important, but I think around technology as well, what Derek and Malik are saying, I think the ubiquity of a cell phone device and a smartphone device. In my generation, when I was growing up, you needed a computer. You needed to have something that you could program in and teach yourself. But now with, I think there's a paradigm shift. I mean, the amount of money that I pay in airtime to nieces and nephews, you can see that this generation is changing. So in order to come up with a good business idea, I think you have literally the tool in your hand. Wow. And it's how do you flesh that idea out? There was a time when you needed a laptop to design a website. On a Mobi site now, you can pretty much do all of that.
So maths and science, is that really the...
Absolutely. From my own experiences, I think, there's probably a cavernous gap in terms of skill sets. So the kids that we tutor are probably at grade 7 sort of comprehension levels for math and science, and yet they're already in grade 10 or 11. So we need to address that. And again, I think it's an issue that needs work on, and it'll probably take a while, because you can't say to somebody, okay, you need to understand your maths, and now you need to understand what entrepreneurial activity is about, when the basics are missing. But I think that time will come. I think the platform is there for Africa to shine.
All right, we're talking about the state of entrepreneurship, and obviously we leave you with a last question. Is entrepreneurship taught or born with? Derek?
I think you get taught how to run a business. I think you have a natural instinct in terms of creation. I think creative minds spawn ideas, and ideas spawn the drive and the will to create something. I think our responsibility as people who will mentor younger people is really to encourage that, because it can be something that lives in everybody. But if there's a fear, if the fear is there, it'll never flourish.